Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. You know, we like to talk about the hard stuff. So in 2020, about June, Sushant Singh Rajput, a famous and beloved Bollywood actor, was in the prime of his career and he committed suicide, allegedly. That is when a lot of rhetoric and a lot of conversation started to talk about suicide and things like that, oh my god, he had it all. He was in the prime of his career. He was a Bollywood actor. He had all these girlfriends. He had the life that every single person in India or Pakistan wanted to be. And why did he do it? I mean, why would someone who has everything want to end their life?
रोज हमारी लाइफ में क्या चल रहा है सर, हम ही जानते हैं.
So that brings us to the topic of conversation of depression and mental health. Mental health is something in South Asia that is just not very much discussed. At least nowadays we're talking about it. Let's talk about Pakistan. For example, when I took my psychiatry rotation here in Pakistan, I learned this crazy fact that there are only 400 or less psychiatrists in this country, meaning that a country of, 200 to 300 million people only have 300 plus or minus psychiatrists to deal with their issues. So that is a fact that really stood out to me. It's very disturbing and it's very upsetting, to be quite honest. So depression is not simply feeling sad. It's not just like curling up in a ball and listening to Billie Eilish. So much more than that. It's, you know, if you go by DSM criteria, if we want to talk specifics here, then yes, it's a matter of 6 months or more of not being able to get out of bed, anhedonia, not being able to feel the same happiness that you felt before while doing the same actions that you felt before, which I discussed in my addiction video. If you want to watch it, just the link is in the description. In the case of Sushant Singh, we just kept thinking, you know, why would he do it? You know, he's a Bollywood actor. He probably has the whole South Asia spun on his finger and every single girl is probably in love with him. You know, why would he do such a thing to himself in the prime of his career? He had everything to live for in our eyes. Just because someone is having a good time and someone is, like for example, before his death, he was in Disney World with his sisters and he was having a good time. He was living his life. When someone ends their life, we immediately think that no, we go into denial. We immediately think that's not possible. You know, he had everything. He or she, whatever. They had everything. They were doing their best and they were living their best life. But in some cases, that's just not it. That's just not how the cookie crumbles. So talking about depression and mental health in South Asia and Pakistan specifically is just very uncomfortable. I still remember, actually, I don't want to get too personal with this video, but I still remember the first time that I felt like I had depression. I was at the age of 14, yes, very young, and I told my mother and grandfather that I think I'm depressed and I would like to see a psychiatrist. What happened after that is very similar to what people experience here in this country. They said, I mean, you're living your best life. You are the top of your class. You know, you're like in marching band. You know, you play the flute. You know, you are good at the flute. What's wrong with you? You know, like, why are you feeling that way? And I do not have to prove to you the legitimacy of my suffering. I mean, you can't measure someone's depression. It's totally subjective. And that's why there is, I guess, the stigma and the complications with people discussing it in today's times. Like, just because you can't see it, just because they look happy, that doesn't mean that you can't see the demons that exist behind their back telling them that you're not good enough, you're not sufficient, you're not doing the right thing, you're too late, you're too old, you're too fat, you're too this, you're too that. Anyway, so some people argue that depression and mental health is just a construct from the West that we don't have in our own culture. However, our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ not only acknowledged and appreciated mental health and depression and utter sadness, he laid the groundwork out for all of us on mental health that is in Islam. So the prophets we have, ﷺ, they were as perfect as we could possibly visualize them. But as humans, they also experienced grief, stress, and other emotional difficulties that we don't talk about enough today. So there was a whole year of grief that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ experienced when he lost his wife Khadija and his Abu Talib, basically. So this was known as the year of sadness. And this was a time in which he was grieving for an entire year. Prophet Jacob, who suffered from a lot of despair because of his son. From his son, Sayyid Yusuf, or as known as Joseph. The Quran basically describes his sorrow as the weakening of his eyesight, and that he, which is described in the Quran, is basically that he started developing a whitish pigment over his eyes, which a lot of my medical people know that is a cataract. So with his depression came physical abnormalities as well. That just proves to us that depression is not just, you know, feeling sad and feeling upset and feeling sorry for yourself, but it's also the physical malnormity that it can affect you physically. I mean, what are you gonna do? Go to a person who has lung cancer and be like,
can you try just not having cancer?
or it's the same thing when you go to someone who's depressed.
Could you try being happy?
Come on. So now let's kind of discuss on how the Prophet ﷺ encouraged us on how to deal with such grief and such sadness. In written Quran, it actually says that whoever Allah expects the best for, He sends them the most difficulty. That you can have someone who is also deeply suffering, but also deeply beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet even said that when in adversity endures someone, adversity meaning hard times, that if he is patient and if he can survive through this, then he will become stronger and more beloved to God.
Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam acknowledged his own sadness, spoke about it, but also highlighted the importance of being careful with our words. That when you focus on coming to terms with reality and accepting the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, contentment, it is that allows for healing.
Not just that, but Prophet Muhammad ﷺ also taught us about healthy habits that we can do to improve our mental health, such as going to sleep at certain times, such as, you know, regulating your sleep, regulating your eating habits, regulating your social behavior. I mean, Islam, mashallah, is just so ahead of its time. As a non-religious person myself, I've become more religious when I read about these practices of anatomy and science that our religion was the first to discover. So I'm very blessed to have been born a Muslim, and I'm very blessed to continue to keep discovering what it's like to be a Muslim in the modern day times.
He said, تداووا عباد الله فإن الله لم يضع داء إلا ووضع معه الشفاء إلا الهرم. Seek out cures, O servants of God, seek out cures, for God has placed for every illness a cure, except for old age.
This obviously creates like a massive treatment gap, which leaves basically 90% of the population who have mental health issues, you know, untreated. And unfortunately, mental health issues are rampant here in Pakistan. I mean, that's not something that we can deny. I bet everyone who's watching this video at least knows someone who is suffering from some sort of psychiatrical illness. For the long term, having more human resources, trained people is very important to have here in Pakistan. It's just, we need to stop thinking about mental health as a stigma or a jinn or some sort of lack of faith that a person may have, and realize that this is actually a physical abnormality, that this is actually a disease. It's should be less thought of than a personality flaw, but a physical disease. In this study, Pakistan actually ranks the lowest when it comes to mental health integration, and is anyone surprised? You realize that you're not the one who has the problem with empathy, but that people around you are the ones that are suffering with lack of empathy. And it's not a stigma. It's something that happens to almost everyone. Everyone is almost prone to it. And it's not something that we should be hiding. It's something that we should seek attention for. It's something that we should go to our psychiatrists and our doctors for, and our psychologists and our therapists. And we should go to them and say, hey, I need help. It doesn't take a weak person to ask for help. It takes a strong person to ask for help. The strongest of people are those that can ask for help. We basically just need more empathy. And empathy in the sense where a person can say, I do not understand what you're going through. I have never experienced what you have gone through. But I understand that what you're feeling is valid. So what we need in this country is just more empathy. Depressed people don't want your pity, they don't want your sympathy, but they just don't want to feel alone anymore. They just want you to understand that what they're feeling is valid, whether they be a millionaire or whether they be living on the street. Depression can affect anybody. It's really important in Pakistan that we just kind of create a safe space where everyone is welcomed. I mean, the horror. We need to learn how to be less judgmental and more empathetic. Like I said before, empathy is kind of like the key to all of our problems that we're having. On that note, I think that completes our discussion. It's fine to not be the best. It's fine to not get the best grades. It's fine if you're not even doing school. It's fine if your cousin has scoring better than you, it's fine. There's no race out here when it comes to life. You just have to learn how to live life and be okay with the ups and the downs. Reach out. There are always going to be people willing to help. If you don't see it at home, then you should go strive out to see it in your community. If you don't have a community, then build one. You got this. You are not alone. There are thousands, millions of people that are struggling with you. I guess that's all I have to say.